The quantum cascade is moving through your systems like a wave, he explained, pointing to patterns that had become increasingly meaningless to Meridian instruments. But waves can be broken. We just need to create discontinuities, gaps that the quantum states can't cross. Another human, Dr. Watson, was already unpacking equipment that looked ancient to Naira's eyes. Simple mechanical switches, fiber optic cables that transmitted light rather than quantum information, and computers that operated on binary rather than quantum principles. Think of it like a fire break, Dr. Watson explained as she worked. When a forest fire approaches a cleared strip of land, it can't continue because there's nothing to burn. We're going to create quantum fire breaks throughout your network. The Meridian technicians watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans began literally cutting into their quantum network, inserting mechanical interfaces between quantum nodes. It was like watching brain surgery being performed with stone tools, and yet, impossibly, it was working. Here, Dr. Chen said, handing a simple mechanical switch to Naira. When I give the signal, flip this switch. It will create the first fire break. Naira's membrane fluctuated with uncertainty as she held the primitive device. This seems counterintuitive. Dr. Chen finished. Sometimes the best solutions are. Your civilization advanced so far into quantum technology that you stopped seeing simpler alternatives. But sometimes you need to take a step back to move forward. The next hours were a blur of activity as the humans worked with incredible speed, installing their primitive but effective technology throughout the quantum network. They divided the city's grid into sectors, each isolated by mechanical switches and analog computers that could not be affected by the quantum cascade. When everything was ready, Dr. Chen gave the signal. Naira activated the switch, feeling almost embarrassed by the crude physical action. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, sector by sector, the quantum cascade began to halt at the fire breaks, unable to propagate through the simple mechanical interfaces. It's working, Dr. Martinez announced, checking his readings. The cascade is contained in isolated sectors. Now we can begin clearing each sector and restoring your quantum systems one section at a time. Naira watched as the humans continued their work, their movements precise despite their apparent chaos. They had solved in days what the Meridians couldn't solve in years, not through superior technology, but by thinking in ways that Meridian civilization had long since abandoned. You know, Dr. Chen said, standing beside Naira as they watched the first sector's quantum systems come back online. Your message said you were willing to trade advanced technology for our help. But I think what we're really trading here is perspectives. You're showing us where quantum technology can lead, and we're showing you the value of keeping some simpler solutions in your toolkit. Naira's membrane shifted to the deep blue of profound realization. Perhaps, she replied, true advancement isn't just about moving forward, but about understanding when to look back. Around them, the quantum crystals began to stabilize, their light steady and strong. But now, they were protected by a network of simple mechanical switches and analog computers, a marriage of the most advanced and most basic technologies, working together to create something stronger than either could achieve alone. The warning alarms caught everyone by surprise. Dr. Sarah Chen was in the middle of supervising the quantum restoration of Meridian Prime's medical district when the emergency signals began pulsing through both human and Meridian communication systems. The cascade, Dr. Martinez's voice crackled through her comm unit. It's adapting. Sarah rushed to the central control room, where humans and Meridians were gathered around displays showing the quantum network status. The mechanical fire breaks had worked perfectly for the first week, containing the cascade and allowing them to restore sectors one by one. But now something had changed. It's finding paths around our fire breaks, Emily Watson explained, pointing to the data streams. The quantum entanglement is somehow jumping across our mechanical gaps. It's like the virus is learning. First speaker Naira's membrane had taken on a pale, sickly color. Impossible. Quantum states cannot simply adapt or evolve. They follow fixed mathematical principles, are based on maintaining our technological superiority. Naira finished. But perhaps what we need now is not superiority, but difference. These humans have developed along entirely different technological lines than our own. They might see solutions that we cannot, precisely because they think in ways we would never consider. She moved to the communication console, her membrane now glowing with purpose. Prepare a message. Use their own communication protocols, translated into their most common languages. Tell them. She paused, considering the dignity of her position, the weight of 50,000 years of Meridian civilization. Then she thought of the darkening cities, the failing systems, and the millions of lives at stake. Dignity could wait. Tell them we need help. Tell them our civilization is dying, and we believe they might have the capability to save us, precisely because they are different from us. And tell them. Her membrane rippled with what humans might have recognized as a smile. Tell them we are willing to trade any of our remaining technology in exchange for their assistance. Let's see if they're as innovative as their signals suggest. The message was sent that day, broadcast on human radio frequencies, encoded in their own primitive binary language. As Naira watched the transmission beam activate, she wondered if she had just committed her final act as first speaker, either through the complete collapse of their civilization or through being removed from office for breaking the contact protocols. But as she gazed at another cluster of quantum crystals flickering and dying, she decided it didn't matter. Sometimes survival required breaking with tradition. Sometimes salvation had to be sought in unexpected places. Now all they could do was wait and hope that these humans were as resourceful as they appeared to be. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the message playback for the 100th time in her cramped office at SETI headquarters. 3 months ago, every radio telescope on Earth had picked up the same signal, a clear, deliberate transmission that had sent the scientific community into a frenzy. It wasn't the random noise of distant stars or the echo of ancient cosmic events. This was a message, carefully encoded in human binary, translated into 12 of Earth's most spoken languages. And you're absolutely certain about the quantum mechanics calculations? She asked, turning to Dr. James Martinez, who had dark circles under his eyes from weeks of endless verification work. As certain as we can be, he replied, spreading out a series of holographic diagrams across her desk. Their quantum systems are millions of years ahead of anything we've even theorized, but the fundamental problem they're describing. It's like a cascade failure in quantum entanglement. Imagine a house of cards built from quantum states, and someone's pulled out the bottom card. Sarah rubbed her temples. The Meridians, as they called themselves, had included detailed technical specifications of their technology along with their plea for help. The data had advanced human understanding of quantum mechanics by decades in just a few weeks, but it had also revealed just how desperately complex their problem was. The thing is, James continued, his excitement breaking through his exhaustion, they're so advanced that they've painted themselves into a corner. Every solution they've tried involves quantum technology, which just makes the problem worse. It's like trying to put out a fire with more fire. Sarah was about to respond when her office door burst open. Dr. Emily Watson, a specialist in mechanical engineering who had no business being in the quantum physics wing of the facility, rushed in waving an old-fashioned paper notebook. What if we're all thinking about this wrong? She blurted out, not bothering with pleasantries. What if the solution isn't in quantum mechanics at all? James frowned. Emily, their entire civilization runs on quantum systems. Of course, the solution has to be. No, listen, she interrupted, spreading her notebook on top of James's holographic displays. Look at what they sent us. Their quantum systems are failing because of some kind of cascading entanglement collapse, right? But they're so focused on the quantum aspect that they're missing something basic, something mechanical. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued despite her skepticism. Go on. It's like a computer virus, but in quantum space, Emily explained, sketching rapidly. It's spreading through entangled systems. But what if we could create physical breaks in the network? Old-school fire breaks, but for quantum information. No quantum technology involved at all. Just plain old mechanical switches and analog systems. James started to object, then stopped, his eyes widening. Like turning it off and on again, but on a civilization-wide scale. Exactly. Emily's pen flew across the paper. We build physical interrupts into their quantum network. When the cascade reaches a fire break, it has to stop because there's no quantum state to propagate through. Just good old-fashioned copper wire and silicon chips. Then we can isolate sections of their network, clear the quantum virus, and restart each section separately. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. It was absurd, using technology centuries behind the meridians to save them. But that was exactly why it might work. The solution wasn't in quantum mechanics at all. It was in the simple physical principles that the meridians had long since abandoned. Within hours, the proposal was being transmitted back to the meridians. Within days, the UN Security Council had approved an unprecedented emergency response mission. The best minds in computing, engineering, and physics were recruited from every nation on Earth. Companies donated equipment and resources, and governments fast-tracked the development of long-range spacecraft. 3 months later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the hastily constructed U.S. Hope, Earth's first true interstellar vessel. Behind her, cargo holds were filled with what would have looked like ancient technology to the meridians. Mechanical switches, optical cables, analog computers, and tools that hadn't been cutting edge on Earth for decades. To think, James mused, standing beside her as they prepared for their first faster-than-light jump. We might save an advanced civilization with technology they'd probably used in their Stone Age. Sarah watched the stars through the view screen, thinking about the strange turns history sometimes took. The Meridians had reached out to humanity precisely because they were less advanced, hoping that a simpler perspective might provide answers their complexity couldn't see. Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones, she said, feeling the ship's engines begin to hum. And sometimes you need an outside perspective to see them. The U.S. Hope disappeared into FTL, carrying humanity's response to an alien cry for help, not with advanced technology or sophisticated solutions, but with copper wire, silicon chips, and the kind of innovative thinking that came from having to solve problems with limited resources. As they traveled through space, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what other surprises this mission would bring. The Meridians had opened contact expecting humans to think outside their box. She suspected they had no idea just how far outside that box humans were willing to go. First Speaker Naira's membrane rippled with barely contained shock as she watched the human ship dock at Meridian Prime's emergency landing facility. The vessel was crude by Meridian standards. All harsh angles and exposed metal, its hull scarred from faster-than-light travel. But it was what emerged from the ship that truly startled her. The humans were so solid. They moved with a deliberate heaviness that seemed impossible to Meridian sensibilities, their bodies entirely physical with no quantum integration. They wore protective suits to breathe in Meridian's atmosphere, making them look even more mechanical and alien. "Welcome to Meridian Prime," she transmitted through the translation matrix. "I am First Speaker Naira. We are grateful for your response to our call." The leader of the human delegation stepped forward. Through her suit's clear faceplate, Naira could see features that the Meridian's preliminary research had identified as female. Dr. Sarah Chen, United Earth Response Team. "Thank you for trusting us enough to call for help." The formalities were brief. There wasn't time for more. Another quarter of the city's quantum grid had failed during the humans' journey, and the cascade was accelerating. The human team immediately requested to see the primary quantum core, their crude scanning devices already active and collecting data. As they walked through the once magnificent halls of the central processing nexus, Naira observed the humans with growing fascination. They moved with an urgency that bordered on chaos by Meridian standards, but there was an underlying purpose to their actions that she couldn't deny. "Your solution," she began carefully, "it seems primitive. Dr. Chen suggested, a peculiar expression that the translation matrix identified as a smile crossing her features. By your standards, absolutely. But sometimes the old ways work best. They reached the core chamber, where the quantum crystals pulsed with increasingly erratic patterns. The humans immediately spread out, their devices scanning and measuring. A male human, Dr. Martinez, Naira recalled, approached one of the master control interfaces. The quantum crystals in first speaker Naira's chamber were dying. One by one, the crystalline matrices that had served as the backbone of Meridian civilization for 50,000 years were failing, their delicate quantum states collapsing into chaos. She watched as another cluster darkened, taking with it centuries of stored knowledge and countless vital systems. The great floating cities of Meridian Prime had already begun their slow descent toward the planet's surface as their quantum levitation fields failed. In the medical districts, doctors struggled with increasingly unreliable diagnostic systems, forced to rely on primitive chemical analysis and visual observation. The very fabric of their society was unraveling, one quantum collapse at a time. First speaker, senior technician Veller's voice, carried the same carefully measured tone all Meridians practiced, but Naira could detect the underlying tension. The anomaly's spread rate has increased by another 12%. At current progression, we have approximately 8 standard months before total quantum system failure. Naira's outer membrane rippled with controlled distress. The Meridians had built their entire civilization on quantum computing, developing it to levels that made their technology appear like magic to most spacefaring races. Their bodies were integrated with quantum systems, their architecture was quantum responsive, even their art was created through quantum probability manipulation. The thought of losing it all was beyond devastating. Have the analysis collectives made any progress in identifying the source? She asked, though she already knew the answer. The Meridians had devoted their best minds to solving the crisis for the past 3 years. No, first speaker. The anomaly appears to violate several fundamental principles of quantum mechanics. Each attempt to study it directly results in accelerated collapse of the observation systems. Valer hesitated, his membrane flushing with the deep purple of shame. We no longer have the capability to properly analyze it. Too many of our advanced systems have failed. Naira moved to the observation dome, gazing out at the once magnificent skyline of Meridian Prime. Half the buildings were dark now, their quantum-responsive surfaces turned to dull, lifeless crystal. Emergency atmospheric vessels darted between structures, evacuating residents from the higher levels before power failures could trap them. "What of the deep space array?" she asked. "Has it detected any similar anomalies in other systems?" The array is operating at 31% capacity, but it has made an unusual detection. Veller's membrane shifted to the blue-green of scientific curiosity. "We've picked up artificial signals from a system approximately 1,200 light-years distant. The civilization appears to be pre-quantum, using primitive radio waves for communication. But the signals show remarkable complexity despite their technological limitations." "Show me," Naira commanded, and Velar activated one of the few remaining functional display crystals. The signal analysis scrolled across its surface, and Naira felt her scientific training assert itself despite the crisis. The patterns were fascinating, crude by Meridian standards, but displaying an innovative use of limited technology that suggested a species with significant problem-solving capabilities. "These beings call themselves humans," Velar explained. "Their primary world, Earth, appears to be in a relatively early stage of technological development. They have achieved basic spaceflight, but haven't expanded beyond their local satellite." However, his membrane flickered with excitement. "They display remarkable adaptability and have developed their technology along completely different paths than our own." Naira studied the signals more closely. The humans used simple binary computing, processed information through crude electronic pathways, and relied on mechanical systems that would have been considered obsolete by Meridian standards millennia ago. Yet they had achieved things that were impressive even by current standards. They had split atoms, explored quantum mechanics, though at a basic level, and were beginning to experiment with artificial intelligence. Most importantly, their technology was completely independent of the quantum systems that were now failing across Meridian civilization. How long would it take to send them a message? Naira asked, an idea forming in her mind. It was unprecedented. Meridian Protocol strictly prohibited contact with pre-quantum civilizations, but these were unprecedented times. Using conventional transmission methods, adjusted to their level of technology, approximately 3 standard months for the message to reach them, Veller calculated. However, first speaker, the contact protocols. Unless, Sarah said slowly, a terrible realization dawning. What we're dealing with isn't just a quantum cascade at all. What if it's something more fundamental? Something that exists in the space between quantum states. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just fighting the quantum virus. They were facing something that operated on principles neither humans nor Meridians fully understood. The firebreaks had only forced it to reveal its true nature. "Look at this," James Martinez called out, his hands flying over his tablet. "The pattern of adaptation. It's not random. It's following some kind of logic we can't see yet. Almost like it's alive," Emily finished, her eyes wide. "Not alive in any way we understand, but some kind of self-organizing pattern in quantum space itself." The Meridian technicians' membranes flickered with distress at the notion. Their entire civilization was based on the predictability of quantum mechanics. The idea of a living quantum entity was beyond their comprehension. But Sarah noticed something else in the data. "The jumps aren't instantaneous," she said, studying the patterns. "There's a delay when it encounters our firebreaks. It has to think before it finds a way around." "So we hit it before it can think," Emily said, already pulling out her notebook. "Instead of static firebreaks, we make them dynamic. Keep changing the configuration faster than it can adapt." "But that would require..." Naira began, her membrane rippling with uncertainty. "Manual control," Sarah finished. "We need human operators controlling each firebreak, reading the patterns, and changing the configurations in real time. No automation, no quantum processing, just human intuition and reflexes." The Meridians recoiled at the idea. Their civilization had automated such tasks millennia ago. The thought of relying on organic beings to manually control their quantum network was almost physically painful to them. But they were out of options. Within hours, the central control room had been transformed. Hundreds of manual control stations were set up, each staffed by a human operator. The stations were deliberately crude, simple switches and dials connected to oscilloscopes and basic digital displays. Nothing quantum, nothing that could be infected or corrupted. "It's like a giant game of quantum whack-a-mole," Emily explained to the bewildered Meridians. "We watch for the pattern trying to emerge, and we change the firebreak configuration before it can fully form." Sarah took her position at the central coordination station. Around her, human operators sat ready, their hands on controls, eyes fixed on their displays. It was probably the most primitive setup the Meridian civilization had seen in 50,000 years. "Beginning quantum restoration sequence," she announced. "All operators, watch your sectors. The moment you see a pattern trying to form, switch your configuration. Don't wait for orders, don't try to predict, just react." What followed was chaos by Meridian standards, but perfectly natural to humans. Hundreds of operators working independently yet somehow in concert, each responding to the quantum entity's attempts to breach their sector. The control room filled with the sound of clicking switches and human voices calling out pattern changes. The Meridians watched in amazement as the humans fought the quantum entity on pure instinct. There was no time for careful calculation or quantum probability analysis. Each operator had to make split-second decisions based on incomplete information and gut feeling. Exactly the kind of irregular, unpredictable response that the quantum entity couldn't adapt to quickly enough. "It's working," James announced after several tense hours. "The entity can't establish a stable pattern. It's starting to break down." Sector by sector, the quantum entity was forced into increasingly smaller spaces, unable to maintain coherence against the chaotic but effective human response. Finally, trapped in a single sector and unable to adapt quickly enough to the constantly changing firebreak configurations, it collapsed entirely. Sarah slumped in her chair, exhausted but triumphant. Around her, the other operators were doing the same, their faces showing the strain of hours of intense concentration. "I don't understand," Naira said, her membrane showing colors of both confusion and awe. "How did you know this would work?" "We didn't," Sarah admitted. "But humans are good at adapting, at trying things that seem illogical. Sometimes the best way to fight something that's adapting is to be more random than it can handle." The Meridians would spend years studying what had happened, trying to understand the quantum entity they had encountered. But they would never forget the day their civilization was saved, not by advanced technology or careful calculation, but by human unpredictability and the willingness to try the impossible. 1 year after the quantum crisis, Meridian Prime sparkled with renewed vitality. The quantum crystals glowed with stable light, but now they were interwoven with what the Meridians had once considered primitive technology: mechanical switches, analog backups, and manual override systems. The integration of both technologies had created something entirely new, a hybrid system that was more resilient than either civilization had achieved alone. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed Earth Embassy, watching the sunset paint the crystalline spires in shades of purple and gold. The original emergency response team had long since returned to Earth, but she had stayed behind as part of the permanent human delegation. There was still too much for both species to learn from each other. "The Council has approved the exchange initiative," First Speaker Naira announced, her membrane glowing with pleasant colors as she entered the chamber. "The first group of human students will arrive next month to study quantum mechanics, and our young ones will travel to Earth to learn about your innovative approaches to problem solving." Sarah smiled. "I still can't believe how much has changed in a year. When we first arrived, your people could barely comprehend using mechanical switches. Now you're incorporating human randomness into your quantum algorithms. And your people are learning to see the patterns in quantum probability," Naira replied. "The research papers from the joint quantum biology team are causing quite a stir in both our scientific communities." They moved to the embassy's observation deck, where a holographic display showed the new warning system they had developed together. It monitored quantum space for any signs of entities, like the one they had encountered, using a combination of Meridian quantum sensors and human-designed chaos theory algorithms. "Have you considered," Naira asked, her membrane shifting to the deep blue of philosophical contemplation, "that perhaps this was inevitable? Not the crisis itself, but this meeting of our civilizations." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Our civilizations took entirely different paths. We pursued quantum technology to its ultimate expression, seeking perfect order and predictability. Your people maintained diversity in your approaches, keeping one foot in the physical world even as you reached for the stars. When the quantum entity emerged, something that defied both our worldviews, we needed each other to understand and overcome it." The holographic display shifted, showing the newest project: a revolutionary spaceship design that combined Meridian quantum drives with human-inspired backup systems and manual controls. It would be the first of a new fleet, crewed by both species, dedicated to exploration and scientific research. "The quantum entity taught us something profound," Sarah reflected. "It showed us that there are things in the universe that don't fit our existing paradigms. The Meridians had the advanced technology, but were too locked into one way of thinking. Humans had the adaptability but lacked the technical sophistication. Together, though, together we create new possibilities," Naira finished. Her membrane rippled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as amusement. Though I must admit, some of our traditionalists are still struggling with your human tendency to solve quantum equations through what you call educated guessing. Sarah laughed. And some of our scientists are still getting headaches trying to understand how your quantum art galleries work. But that's the point, isn't it? We challenge each other's assumptions. We make each other think in new ways. They watched as a group of Meridian and human scientists passed through the embassy lobby below, engaged in animated discussion about their latest project. The humans gestured energetically while the Meridian's membranes shifted through academic color patterns, but there was an easy comfort between them that would have been unimaginable a year ago. You know what the most interesting finding from the quantum entity research was? Sarah asked. The theory that it might have been attracted to your civilization precisely because you had achieved such perfect quantum order. Your very perfection created an environment where it could emerge, while your human chaos proved to be its undoing. Naira agreed. There is a lesson there about the value of imperfection, of maintaining multiple approaches rather than pursuing a single path to its extreme. A alert chimed softly. Another group of human scientists had just arrived through the quantum teleporter. They would need to greet them, begin the process of cultural integration all over again. But before they left the observation deck, Naira's membrane shifted to a color Sarah had never seen before. We sent that distress call hoping to find someone who could help us, the first speaker said softly. Instead, we found partners who showed us a whole new way of seeing the universe. Your people didn't just save our civilization, Dr. Chen. You helped us grow beyond what we thought we could be. Sarah smiled, thinking of all the changes this encounter had brought to both their worlds. Earth was advancing its quantum technology by decades while maintaining its technological diversity. Meridian was learning to embrace uncertainty and adapt to change. And together, they were preparing to explore a universe that suddenly seemed much larger and more wondrous than either civilization had imagined. That's what humans do best, she said finally. We don't just solve problems. We find new ways to look at them. And now we can do that together. Above them, the quantum crystals pulsed in harmony with the manual systems, a constant reminder that sometimes the most powerful solutions come from embracing seemingly opposite approaches. In the end, it wasn't just about humans saving an alien civilization or gaining advanced technology. It was about two different ways of thinking coming together to create something greater than the sum of its parts. And somewhere in the quantum realm, in the spaces between possibility and probability, the universe itself seemed to hum with new potential.